if we have, if sir are able to hear?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Voice is clear?
Yes, sir. Voice is very clear. Very clear.
So, if we are able to enjoy what we do, a part of the story is nice. But when we say noble, one of my teachers was telling me, like, why it's noble. You can't live in falsehood. You will have to talk truth only all the time. And he would typically give an example. You can't teach Newton's law different in different forms or with different versions. Maybe change of words, etc. is okay. But Newton's law remains the same. You have to tell the same truth all the time. You can't call one thing as Newton's law once and another thing as Newton's law another time. So in that sense, to that extent only is noble. But rest is what we earn for this profession. For example, from times immemorial, we have been told it's a noble profession and all that. But let me see what exactly it means to all of us as teachers. Basically, teacher is one who is associated with education. Education, as we know, is the fundamental need for any society for its existence, for its evolution, for its adaptation to new requirements and challenges and more. And this game of education or this process of education or this paradigm of education, whatever may call it, is so critical that there is nobody outside the scope of this domain. Every person needs education. The education that the common man requires, who might not have come to school or who might not have come to very reputed colleges or who might not have been formally trained, also has some education. This is also done by teachers, may not be those who are called teachers by qualification in the appointments and so on. Every one of us have learned so many things from everybody around us. For example, the mother is the first teacher. We have learned so many things. So in that sense, the teacher is a very generic institution. In fact, what we all need, every one of us, is the functional education. That is the education that we need to sort of carry on with our day-to-day transactions and do some kind of work which is productive to the needs of society. A school teacher may go and teach something in the school. A carpenter has to do some work in making a furniture or XYZ, whatever, say equipment, sorry, devices that he needs to produce. So every one of us have to do some, a trader has to do some trading. All this has a functional level. In the sense, learning to behave and coordinate with the remaining rest of the society, doing things with honesty, self-respect, and being very, very useful and productive, and learning to understand the world we live in. This is the functional education. This is provided obviously from our environment, and also I'm sure every one of us have understood the importance of this. What our primary school teachers started, like right from literacy, the ability to read and write to basic hygiene to so many things become so critical that all of us are very much molded in that early stage. In fact, this functional education implies, in particular, the ability to function and also be a responsible citizen. In fact, I was reading a book some 2 decades back. The author writes in the first paragraph that most things that I needed in life, of course, he means the functional angle. Most things that I needed in life has been taught by my mother. The author says, my mother taught me how to flush the toilet when I use it, how to greet people, understand them, and sort of work with them, and how to make this place something which is always present to everyone, not only me and but to my environment. This is what my mother taught. Imagine if the child at the age of 4 is told all these things or is able to learn all these things, much of the problems in functional education is over. But we need to read, we need to write, we need to carry on so many activities, maybe do a bank transaction, learn to know how to switch on a light, when to switch on, when to switch off. All these routine course form the functional part. This is more for fulfilling the societal needs and the materials that we need to get. This is more for a life of comfort and dignity. But this is not adequate. We have the next layer, which is extremely important in a society which continuously changes. No society is static. If a society is static and decadent, that's the sort of this end of the society. It's going to be not there any more relevant. It's dangerous. Therefore, any society has to keep learning, and the role is played by the teacher here. It's basically to challenge the intellect and to equip us with the ability to do better. For example, imagine I am a factory worker, I am using a machine, the later version comes. Instead of a manually operated, a computer controlled kind of system or auto control systems, whatever, the things have changed. I must be able to learn and start using it. We all know that we used only calculators one time. Today we have such supercomputers which bear no comparison with the kind of calculators that we use. Or think of any device, there is a later version. The people used to employ bullock carts, but today we have the fastest trains, the spaceships. As the technology changes, we must be able to meet the needs of the society through improvement in technology and process. Where does this all happen? It has to happen with the teacher through schools, colleges, institutions, and the associated systems. Therefore, we have a functional role for education, and that's where the teacher participated and continues to participate. We have a developmental layer where all the new challenges and the changes are addressed. Then it's the next phase where the society has to move forward for better living. For example, we are talking of global warming, floods everywhere, hurricanes. How does man survive on this? How does the fauna and flora survive on this planet? What kind of dwelling should be planned? Can man, if the global temperature goes up, survive? Because some of the crops may not grow. So how to manage that? Where do you grow crops? Do you grow them in factories, and have you got the ready technology, or are we inventing that today? So research particularly plays a big role in advancement, and that is extremely important, more so in the 21st century. We all know that if we look at the last 100 years, what might have happened in the first 90 years has happened in the last 10 years. And what might happen in the next 10 years, if you calculate, it may be by and large the last 1 year. In other words, the midpoint may be 9 years out of the 10. So that way there is a fast pace of changes in the society, and man has to, we all know what we are talking of, space travel to so many other things. getting energy, getting minerals from other planets and so on. How do we create this new body of knowledge? This comes from research, and this is actually the one which will take us further going forward in the society. See, the teacher is one who has to function in all these three layers. He has to be part of a functional education, he has to be part of a developmental education, he has to be a part of advancement or the futuristic kind of things in the education system. So, we have therefore a very complex role. What are the constants in the role of the teacher, and what are the changes, or let us say the things that are not constants? See, in all these three, we can, in a very, very subtle way, find out how things have been changing. For example, the school level education and the vocational education covers the first layer. For example, the functional layer is met by this. Everybody needs literacy, everybody needs to transact with the world around him and so to meet the societal needs. The teacher has a play role here, as a role. Let's see what are changing. Then we have worked in this developmental education as teachers. Here, meeting needs of society through improvement in technology and other processes. This is the second phase or second layer where the teachers have always contributed. And then the teacher has also contributed at the advancement level. Without advancement, it becomes a static society and it starts rotting. It is this which can leapfrog the whole system for newer comforts and for solving life problems in society. Let us all look at one or two critical cases. For example, the discovery or let us say use of semiconductors put to use has changed the society so much. It would take months for people to communicate from one part of the world to another part of the world. But today, sitting here, you can link up with anybody in any part of the world within a split second, within seconds at best. So this has become possible because of the developmental or advancements in semiconductor technology and communication technology. What about the healthcare? Most of you agree with me when I say that about 50 years back or 60 years back, the longevity was only around 38 years for the average Indian. Today, the average life expectancy in this country is more than 70 years. How did this happen? Understanding diseases, research in pharmaceutical and healthcare segment, and then building the societal, say, income levels by research and making more people afford reasonable health care, and all this has increased the longevity. India was once a country which had tremendous food shortage. I still remember in my younger days, there used to be some wheat as a grant sent by United States to India. Today, India is a food surplus country. Look at milk revolution or white revolution. All this has been possible because of the advancement of science and technology. Teachers have played a role here. So the role of the teacher in functional education, developmental education, and advancement have all been constants. But in higher education particularly, research and development, apart from formal teaching, becomes extremely critical. And at the lower level, maybe say inputs or participation of the teacher in making children be good learners and get the functional knowledge would be probably seen as adequate. But with the changing society and the particularly digital technology and other things coming up, even functional education has seen a big change. One time, all that was needed by teachers at the functional level was information. In fact, we all remember when we were young, people of my age. I'm not meaning the present day young professors around. If a teacher explained all the concepts properly, wrote some neat diagrams, and his communication was good, he was a great teacher. The role, by and large, at least was completed there. They never did that to our generation. Our teachers also taught us self-learning and innovation to whatever level at that sort of stage of evolution of the body and mind. But information itself was a great thing because it was in shortage. Today, information has become a junkyard. We have so much information that you need information on information systems, or we have information systems, we say, where do we get what? Google is a great example. The role of advancement and also development, say, phase of education has not caught up as much as it should catch up, is what we should understand. But anyway, this role was there, or this part was there for as a constant for teachers even before and continues now. Let us see what happened to us, particularly India. In the 1700s, early 1700s, the GDP of this country was about 24.5% of the global GDP. In fact, India and China put together had 50% share of the global GDP. We were extraordinarily good as a society. Education, health, and trade and commerce were all on the flourishing levels. Otherwise, we couldn't have been 24.5% of global GDP. All the three needs were met actually before the European occupation, or to be a little earlier also, before the invasions that preceded that. In fact, India had a large number of gurukuls where every person had the sort of facility to learn the functional level, the developmental level, and the advancement level. In fact, what we call today as equality, equanimity, and so on, and these terms were very much practiced. Krishna did not go to a high-end school. Krishna went to the same school where his poor friend also studied. And the kings were sending their children to the gurukuls or ashrams without the sort of, ego that we see often today to the then gurus. And therefore, there was more of the equanimity and less of class or other factors that existed in our institutions. And the kind of work that was done by Charaka, Shushruta, and so on those days were probably lost during the occupation. And India created knowledge. For example, the non-rusting iron pillar to many things, metallurgy, healthcare, and so many technologies were there in India much before the Western world had it. And India was wealthy. I don't have to say this because the GDP I told you is was about 24%. Who did all this? This was done by a very strong education system. The strong education system was obviously not the kind of ones which we see today. They were all established by teachers. They were all established by teachers. Just like, in music we hear of gharanas, this school, that school, and so on. the days when Gurukulas thrived, the sages, the rishis, and the teachers had few thousand students in each of the universities, even dating prior to Nalanda and Takshashila. They did not teach only what many people think is a fact. Many people argue that they taught some scriptures, religious texts, and so on, like Vedas, Puranas, and all that. No, everything that was required for the society to survive and thrive and sort of evolve were all taught by those days. The guru would always wait for understanding the needs, capabilities, competence, the attitude, and so on, and train each student in the field which he or she was good at. Today we have similar thing. Go to the Western universities, go to US, go to Europe. There is a SOP. They want to know why you want to study something, and the professors, though they come under the umbrella of a university, the teachers have to earn their projects. And in fact, only then they will be able to, say, grow their department. So the role of the teacher from the days before the European occupation in this country to today, it centers around the teachers. The teachers were not simply those who transferred information from their heads to the students' heads, or from small, say, written manuscripts to the students' notes. That was not the kind of thing. They were both teachers and practitioners, in the sense they learned, they were learners, and they were also teaching. In fact, if somebody had to teach pottery, that person was a potter by profession. He would learn pottery and teach pottery. It's not like, I show a video, a picture of how pots are made and tell people to do pottery. So the example could be crude. If it's today's world, it would be maybe if someone understands how a chip is designed or how a chip is fabricated, and then a student learns with him, obviously his knowledge and other higher order competencies will be far superior to what happens, which normally is not the case in our schools and colleges. For example, I might not have been a chip designer, but I take a course on chip design. I am not somebody who has built a machine myself, but I teach machine design. I am not somebody who has done a lot of surgeries, but I teach surgeries. I have not seen a nuclear reactor. I don't have even a iota of how big it could be, but I teach nuclear reactors in my physics class. So somewhere there's a big gap that has arisen primarily due to this occupation. What happened during this occupation was they wanted us to stick on to functional levels. If somebody has to rule somebody, he should follow instructions and not think beyond that. His educational levels should be curtailed to functional levels. This is what precisely happened to this country. I'm not giving a ideology of any particular, say, organization in this country, but it's a fact. If we could do so much, for example, the sculptures that we did, where were those turning machines? Where were those polishing machines? Where were those tall, say, huge masses moved up to such heights? Did they use cranes? Did they use, say, pulleys? Did they use slopes, inclined planes to take those huge masses used in the construction of temples? We had certainly the technology in some form. May not be exactly what we are seeing today, but apart from functional, developmental, and advancements were constantly happening in this country. But we lost particularly the top two, namely the developmental and advanced, and we got stuck to functional education. Therefore, the teacher actually became weaker or poorer in this period. India lost its wealth. You know, today the contribution to global GDP is only about 2%. We had to depend on the Western countries, particularly to start with, it was European countries for all our technologies. We know how Indian Institute of Science came into existence. All of us know about the story where Tata was traveling in a ship along with Swami Vivekananda, and he was asked, "Why are you going there?" He said, "I want to check the quality of this mineral for production of iron. Are you sure they are going to tell you the truth?" This is how the whole thing began. And then said, "Why don't you start an institution here which you can use to check and rely upon that a lot more than take it to some other country." So it is a fact, it is not just an accusation that India lost its abilities to do research and so on during this period. It was by design we lost this to the West. Till very recently, we know that what happened in the space technology or air travel industry, for right from cryogenic engine to so many things, we were not given that technology because consciously India was kept out of this development because they would see India as a competitor. Therefore, in this period, had our education system not lost this, we would have been as much ahead as anybody else. But the one exception that has really happened in this country is the space science technology, where we are today one of the global leaders. All these roles, namely the roles that were lost, namely for development and also for the advanced levels of teaching, were all lost as opportunities. And today we know that if you don't have the right technology, you cannot compete with the other countries where they have the high-end technology. You want to prepare a material, you want to make some nanoparticles, you want to produce something else, that's something else. You need those high-end tools. So unless we have such industries dealing with R&D and teaching institutions associated with them, I'm 100% sure that we cannot progress. And this is what has happened during the occupation by the Britishers. So we are lost and we are staying only at the functional level. We are good, we pass some exams, we know something, somebody trains us, and we get a job. I think our life is very short. Life in the sense, our survival life is very short with this. Therefore, what should we do? Post-independence, we should have done that, and we have done moderately well. So the role of the teacher started changing from functional education to developmental education and advancements. Therefore, looking at the pace, when people are talking of downloading lot of content or uploading lot of content to a human brain, what is contained in hundreds of books, when people are talking about space travel, saying, there'll be space trips, we will go and get some minerals from Mars and some other, say, planets and meteors and things like that. When people talk this language, we know it is ultimately the technology. And therefore, if India has to catch up with the rest of the world, I think we need to change our system of education. How do we change the system of education? Work more in the developmental area and the advancement area. The general education, like the school level education, is functional and it is needed for survival. But the developmental things also are something which has vastly changed the life. For example, today we teach robotics, we teach drones, we teach so many other technologies. There are arguments that, by producing more drones, you take away jobs for human beings. We already know that huge, say, marketing people use drones to sort things, and probably a day is not far off when drones come and deliver all our parcels and not these boys, done so to the other delivery schedules will all happen through technology. India is able to that way reasonably reach the developmental technology now. Thanks to IT industry and some other industries, lot of apps being developed. Of course, still we are quite far when it comes to developing fundamental technologies or fundamental groundbreaking researchers which can sustain us for decades. Uh, Today we buy a mobile phone, some part of the money goes to somebody sitting in some corner of the world because of the patent and the kind of fundamental technology work that they have done. I think our schools, colleges, particularly higher education, has to get into this area. India is regaining the developmental ability, but certainly we are still too far from the advanced technology development or advanced science research. We have to create newer technologies and knowledge. For example, we have been talking of Atal Tinkering Labs and Atal Innovation Centers and so on. They are certainly the right steps in the direction, but the magnitude and the pace at which we have got to do it should be far, far higher. In fact, I am of the opinion that our teachers, as teachers, we are all capable because India was a country of entrepreneurs. India was not a country of, say, service providers, just the routine gatherer-hunter kind of society. It was not. We all know about the size of India that existed, and the early traders across the globe were Indians. And today, Bangalore is spoken of as one of the, say, capital cities for the entrepreneurships. And therefore, the material is good here. The Indian student is good. The society is actually one which has tasted the benefits of entrepreneurship and high-end research one time, but we should quickly establish that. And this is possible only for teachers who can be in higher education. And that will automatically lead to long-term wealth creation, and only technology and basic science research is what can take us to the next level. The current situation is the optimization of the functional things. For example, we have been actually through a game, also partly imposed by Westerners, that we should increase the enrollment ratio in higher education, as if higher education enrollment will solve all the problems. In fact, functional efficiency has to increase, particularly with the digitization models that the country has started doing, has made functional education a little better. Today, the vegetable vendor uses a mobile phone, uses apps. You don't have to carry cash. All that you need is scan a QR code and make the payment. I'm sure this fast adoption of technology has not happened in other countries, whereas it is highest in India today. So functional level, this is one example, but there are several things where functional work can be done much better, and we have got to do that. And I'm sure we are reasonably good in this. In fact, in some areas we are better than any other country. Then we need to focus and strengthen the developmental technology, developmental say space of education. Developmental space of education is using technologies for optimal utilization and making small changes in the systems that are developed already, make them more efficient, make them do multiple functions. This kind of technologies, which most of our youngsters are capable of doing, is also happening. And instead of all the credit-based courses, we should be able to encourage students, particularly in the colleges and universities, to offer courses which can contribute a big way to the developmental space of education. And I'm sure most of us as teachers will also be seen much better when we can help them in this direction. So we as teachers have a responsibility in the current situation to improve the functional efficiency and then also to build the developmental education that we had once and which is something called for sustenance. It is not actually for becoming a global superpower. Then we have the advancements where the space at which we have to work as a country should be amazingly fast, amazingly high. We all know the story of Israel. Israel is a country of people who have been hunted so much that they had no piece of land, and finally they have found a piece of land. But the kind of technology they have developed today, the kind of advancements they have made, take any field, the kind of communication technology to the kind of warfare, to the kind of agricultural, say, tools and technologies developed. Being virtually a desert land, they are much better in their food production efficiency. They are able to control 3/4 of the world through their technological power. In fact, India need not fear at all looking at Israel. Israel is a role model as far as the technology is concerned. And therefore, we must, as teachers, change our roles from just the classroom transactors to practitioners. Practitioners in the sense, practice technology, practice science, practice everything and then teach. Teaching without practice cannot take the competition that we are facing in these two areas, namely developmental and advancements. So, if we look at finally the role of teachers in higher education, I think research is integral to higher education. I have been not exactly in the space of higher education as a teacher, but my association has been quite close-knit with a lot of engineering colleges and industries through friends and some kind of interactions. Let me tell you, the strong perception I have today is research is the only thing that can save India from the present position and reach the advancement levels required in higher education. In fact, a friend was telling me one day, why should you people offer so much of coursework? Give the curriculum, because we have, as universities, have the freedom. Design a curriculum, ask the students to learn by themselves. What they can learn, they should be able to learn. And if I can read a book and learn, the student can read a book and learn. And gone are those days when information was in shortage. It is now formation of ideas that is more important. Information is available in plenty. Therefore, most, at least 60–70% of coursework they can do on their own. And there can be a panel of people who are all again teachers, practicing teachers, those who do research, those who do technology, those who say build systems, and such kind of faculty is what we should transform into. Instead of reading a book and making a nice presentation or building a circuit and making a nice presentation, build products. We have to build products and convert our capabilities into wealth for this country. And that comes only through higher education. And right from graduation upwards, research should actually be a major part. Most countries today, small countries like Taiwan, Korea, they have all been moving up the value chain, partly due to the mass production that is served by the functional and developmental say teachings, but much happens in advancement because of research. And the next thing is, by research, we should be able to enhance their attitude. If a student keeps learning the concepts which are already in the book are understands what is already existing as a product or a service, his attitude is okay. I think life goes on. On the contrary, by building the right aptitude and offering courses where a lot of credits can be earned by hands-on and brains-on, they will be able to build the capabilities. They should be able to build capabilities, not just in domain, but also in thinking and visualizing new products, new production services. So the role of the teacher has to vastly change from one of preacher to one of practitioner. And the one other important thing for us to drift in this direction is evaluate capabilities and not knowledge. Okay, on what factors does the frequency of a Hartley oscillator depend, or Colpit oscillator depend, or something else depend, is no good. But can he build one? Can he design an oscillator himself? Can he make it function better than all the existing kind of things? Or can he see, creating objects is one thing. With respect to the situation, there can be following, say, phases. I have a system, I have a machine, how to use it is one more or less functional level. To make it better is a developmental level. To create something which is not there, which can change life, which can probably solve real life problems, is certainly great. But what is outstanding is, or what is the highest change that is required and has to be brought with the help of teachers is creating something which is not there, creating something which we have not seen. Ultimately, advancement will have to take us to this level, and that happens only with the teacher. And recently, I had a very enlightened man who was talking to me and sort of sharing his very personal sort of disturbed ethos on what is happening to this country. He was telling the following. He said, Nagaraj, in the next 10 years, if we don't change very rapidly, we will be in a very bad shape. Then he elaborated. In 10 years, there will be 3 kinds of societies. He meant when society, he meant nations. The first kind of society is where they do the cutting edge technology which we are unable to imagine today, and they will virtually rule the whole world. Those who do cutting edge technology and research to virtually control the whole world. The second set of societies or countries are those who will be able to digest or consume this technology and other services. The last one will be those who can't even afford this technology. He was telling at the end, I hope and pray that India does not fall into that last category. If, of course, getting into that cutting edge technology and becoming global leaders in a short time of 10 years may be difficult, but certainly we should be able to stay in that mid-band where technology, work and research, particularly in changing the whole landscape of education, particularly higher education, where a lot of new ideas and innovations are expected. A lot of flexibility is also introduced by the new education policy. We should be at least in that second band of nations or societies where we will be also contributing and consuming the benefits of advanced high-end cutting-edge technology. So I think all that we need now is to move forward and work in our education system so that the role of the teacher remains the same. It's a constant one, but we move from preachers to practitioners of the high-end learning tools to evolving methods and producing products and services at global level. I thank you for giving me this opportunity. This is not a technical talk. This is more a talk on the qualitative aspects of the role of the teacher and how we move forward. Thank you very much. Thanks everybody for your participation.
Thank you, sir. I request
you.
Professor VKM sir to please moderate the question and answer section.
Thank you, madam. Thank you very much.
Presentation feedback. Very screen
Yeah, we had a very interesting but very thought-provoking lecture from Honorable H.S. Nagaraja sir. It was quite illuminating. In fact, he did actually an introspective job of where we stand and how we should proceed further. He not only suggested and elicited lot of truths that were historical in nature, but they are hard facts. He also emphasized that, there is a dire necessity for us to change and change for the better, especially in higher education, where research has got to be on the thrust mode, on the priority mode. Else we have a danger of, lagging behind and, which is not our actual genes, which are not our actual Indian genes. He has clearly highlighted so many important facts in such a plain language that everybody could understand so straight. Sir, thank you for a beautiful lecture. It took us to, there is a lot of introspection, as well as there is a clarion call that we have to awake right now, else we will be in the society number 3, which is not, a good thing for such a glorious past that we had in the past. I open this topic now for discussion, and we have already one question, Professor Nagaraja sir.
Yes, sir.
And that
yes,
is
sir.
from one of the pet student, our Dean, Professor Srinivasa, A. Srinivas.
Yeah.
He was one of your very, very good student, and he has asked,
proud of him.
Sir, there is a fear that fundamental principles in science are being treated as black box. Fundamental analytical and thinking abilities have taken a back seat. Could you show some light on that?
Sir, I have been myself a teacher of basic science. Unfortunately, in the last few decades, at least 20, 30 years, with the thrust towards engineering. Engineering is certainly a backbone for the country's technological development, but a disproportionate rush towards engineering and to some extent to medicine, particularly is a smaller number, sort of weaned away the admission of bright children to basic sciences. The reasons could be several. One of the reasons is, I have argued it with people who mattered for improving the science education in this country by policies. A boy in this 5th or 6th semester in an engineering college gets a placement, but a first ranker in a basic science course, an MSc student does not get a placement. I was telling, one of the things is treat them with dignity and show them that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. For example, if a bright MSc fellow, I know students for myself who left engineering, left medicine and went to pure science. But at the end of his MSc program, he had to go from door to door to get a job. Then the answer was, I should tell the name, the answer was, we have CSIR labs, that, this and all that, they are welcome. I said, asking somebody to come invite for a lunch is different from serving food at the door. This is precisely what has happened. One of the factors, the socio-economic factor is one thing responsible for bright people not coming into basic sciences or understanding fundamental sciences. The second thing is, there's a poor quality. I'm not commenting on my fraternity, but I tell you with pain that this is a fact, that the quality of teaching and learning in the basic science programs has fallen drastically. The reasons are the following. Number one, there are no good lab facilities, and all the learning that they do are never exploratory. I teach Newton's laws, then ask him to do an experiment. Or I teach gravitation in the theory eloquently, and then I give him a simple pendulum. He does not understand how that simple pendulum with some 100 oscillations counted thrice and some value of t being put in that formula gives g. What is the relation between acceleration due to gravity and that pendulum? Most of the times it's not evident. That is the way science is being taught. With today's technology, actually, all that you need is a Bluetooth chip, which you can embed, and you have got sensors and IoT of things. You can virtually bring out so many aspects of when the acceleration becomes maximum or when the velocity becomes maximum. Are they in phase? Are they out of phase? What is the mathematical theory governing that? If A is equal to minus some omega squared x, how exactly can you compute that? Can you show the behavior? So much of science can be taught in an experiential way, and that does not happen. Most of us got G as 9.8 because we could do back calculation and adjust the value to be 9.8. This is rewarded. So first thing is change the way science is learned in this colleges. And second, some kind of security for every industry. If basic science research can be strengthened, the technology delivery and product delivery will also be much better. Somebody who has done an engineering in electronics or computer science, if he also knows the material science, he may be much better in making out a product. If he knows where to procure them, which is the latest in terms of technology, he will make a much better product. So somewhere there is a greater bonding between engineering colleges and science colleges. And a few basic science courses can be made part of a few credit courses in engineering. Because we as basic science colleges have not come up with all the necessary laboratory facilities, at least in days to come. I think if by strengthening lot of, say, experiential learning, in the sense exploratory learning of science, then the science learned the way history is learned. Newton did this, Boyle did this, Euler did this, somebody else did this, Aurangzeb did this, Akbar did this. There is no difference. We have learned the same way. This has been responsible. I think going forward, better learning of science facilities by attracting right students, creating more employment opportunities, and offering a lot of science courses as credit courses in engineering could be one of the solutions, I think. There are areas where a lot of applications can happen. Usually engineering colleges ignore basic sciences. Physics only one semester, sir. Chemistry only one semester, sir. There is no use. So this attitude we should remove jointly as teachers. Srinivas, I think I have stretched it too far. I don't know whether you are convinced. That Srinivas?
Yeah, I think Srinivas has got it.
Yeah.
It was a very apt answer in the sense, that we will have to really rely on the fundamental science on which engineering can be built. Nowadays, there is a great realization from engineers or the engineer domain itself, sir. You realize now even engineering is called engineering science. Even for example, management is known as management science. So the science is being realized of late that it is extremely the living thing which on which it is not seen, but it is the foundation of everything that is going to be.
Even in engineering,
superstructures. Yes.
One way we can strengthen this, professor, is even in engineering, in addition to our measurement labs and verification labs, we should have a lot of exploratory labs.
Absolutely.
Through which the student can say what he wants to study, or with some definitions, of course, offer courses where they explore from basic concepts to products.
Absolutely. Exploration gives that experience And
Yeah.
that is what is more lasting than just theoretical knowledge. Yeah.
Otherwise, I know I had to answer 5 questions.
There is one
out
more
of 8
question, sir.
questions.
Yeah.
That's
There is,
happened.
the next question is,
Sir, it's not to be seen as blaming. I'm sorry, I'm a teacher first. I respect all teachers as much as I sort of treat myself. Yeah. Sir, next question.
sir, the next question is from Mr. Narendra Reddy, who asks you, today's teaching or education system has become an opportunity for business.
Yeah.
How does a country like India should overcome it, sir?
Sir, actually, it requires a political will, and the answer is not so simple. All that I can say probably is the government should also think of this. The only thing is allow people, when you can't stop, allow it to degrade very fast. Sorry to say this as a solution. See, today investment into education is not coming for education. I can tell loudly anywhere. Okay, be it so. But if the benefits of education are at least delivered by us through the right kind of, say, interventions by teachers and the at least academic faculty, I think slowly the wiser people and the other people also have the courage to start this. Therefore, we cannot stop somebody who starts it as much a business as selling onions or something else. I and you cannot stop. I have another solution which can probably serve a small fraction. The industries have a responsibility. The corporates have a responsibility to the society. Now, most corporates offer bonus shares, dividends, etc. for all people. In fact, I may also be a culprit in that sense. We all benefit. They are happy, industry has done well. But the education that the students get is subsidized by taxpayers' money. The industry should actually harness or culture its own sort of input. In other words, industry should come forward to start and provide the right kind of education, right from basic sciences to applied sciences to management to financial sciences and products, at the quality that they are capable of actually producing. This can only, in fact, you can't say somebody should not start, but you should encourage the other group who are better to start this. So if industries, instead of giving it the so-called CSR and spend like that, I'm not saying that should be stopped. There are various reasons, but part of their profits, at least through CSR, can start good engineering colleges, good basic science colleges, good economics institutions. You can partly pull this condition of the country out of the woods. Industry should come forward.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Not investors.
Absolutely, sir. Absolutely. Now, industries are buying the products, but they are not that much helping to make the products, especially
exactly,
graduates.
Sir.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
see, they
this,
should
this
produce the products.
This has to
consume.
Go in the well-meaning of industry people, and also they should be made known that, you know, product while you buy, you should also have some onus to produce products also.
Yes,
especially
exactly.
Yeah, that was very well said. Very well said.
Graduates,
yeah,
but they must spend towards that. It's
Yes,
otherwise something like I go to the say lake and catch the fish.
No, it is very simple, sir. Only the students, you know, they go abroad and study. You know, if you leave them, it is the country is at the last. That's all, is it not? Yes. So industry has to wake up this, reverse the situation.
Produce their own
reverse
input.
the situation. Yeah. The next question, sir, is, may I, this is from Dr. Arvind Srinivas, Professor Arvind Srinivas, who talks about what are the key challenges of teaching science in native tongue of students, specifically the kind of lexicons needed for terms like over-the-top technology, live streaming, and need for faculty textbooks to be developed. He's talking about necessity of local language or the vernacular language for better understanding.
Sir,
especially technical things.
I fully endorse this. There are many countries today which don't teach in English. I was also one of those who believed, for mobility and various other reasons of acquiring knowledge at global levels of information, English is a necessity. True, it remains. But the comfort and the convenience of understanding is always local. At least in the new education policy, certain things are being thought of in this direction. See, I can take 2-3 minutes.
Yes, sir. Please.
Yeah. So in the past, I have also been a sinner in the sense I have participated in curriculum revision couple of times at the graduate level and PUC level. We were given, particularly PUC level, okay, this is NCERT curriculum, you can change 10%. What are the sort of factors that guide the change? Don't know. They are teaching sound in first year, I'll put it in second year. Somebody teaches geometrical optics in first year, I'll teach it in second year. This kind of changes were only made. Some topics were removed. Oh, what if students do not know about, say, computers? Teach some basics. Teach them some, say, input-output devices, architecture, basic CPU. This kind of simply syllabus was either deleted or added because we had the freedom. But this time there has been a suggestion. In fact, I was also part of that suggestion again, that if 10% change is needed, you should use the kind of freedom. You should use the freedom to the level that it helps the particular culture and the ecosystem. For example, somebody in a tribal place or a coastal place may understand certain kinds of examples much better than what a Bangalore boy understands. And what is relevant for the fellow in the coastal area on soil quality or say something else, how to manage the floods, how to manage something is more relevant. The physics of the chemistry or biology of that is more relevant there than for a Bangalore boy. He does not understand some of those names at all. Therefore, we should actually not only provide it in the vernacular, we should also ensure that some percentage of, see, there are some core concepts which everybody has to know to progress. But the freedom up to about 10-15% should be given to the kind of situations and the issues that are relevant to the local needs. Maybe how many such changes if you ask me, maybe a state like Karnataka can have, say, 4 or 5 variations to the extent of 10%. What is good for a dry place, what is good for a rainy place like Chikmagalur or coastal places, what is good for an urban place like Bangalore or Mysore. You can make 4 or 5 clusters, make small changes in the curriculum and the way they learn, and also make every learning as far as possible in the local language. It is a responsibility of all of us to contribute and even bring it on because blended teaching will be part of, or blended learning will be there to stay. In fact, transport, so many other issues, socio-economic issues are also very relevant. Therefore, every child in the next at least 10 years should be able to learn in the local language, and all the resources must be available as freeware. Only how to use that knowledge or process that knowledge into applications and higher order, say, things like, evaluate, acquire analytical and reasoning skills or synthetic skills, that should be the role of the teacher. And that requires special, say, products on the system, and the children should be able to learn that language. And I think it's again a community responsibility. Government can only make statements, but it will not be able to implement.
Yes, sir.
We should all do as teachers.
Wonderful, sir. Now the next question is from Dr. Kerur, SS Kerur, who writes that, may I know the roles and responsibilities of private school college teachers and public school college teachers? Kindly enlighten us.
I actually don't see any difference in their roles and responsibilities. As a teacher, as a system, it should say care for student cannot change, care for the teacher cannot change, care for the society cannot change. But the small difference that we always see is a process implementation mechanism that is very different from the private schools to the public schools. In fact, we have excellent teachers in some of the government schools. We all studied in government schools. And I can say that we had some of the best teachers, which we don't find even in private institutions today. But for various reasons, social, political, and other reasons, things have changed. It's still not very late, but an impartial sort of evaluation system, right? Instead of the government machinery and hierarchy, if there should be a public-private partnership, men of eminence, men who are involved in social work, if they can jointly look at the entire educational landscape as education councils or bodies which are having not exactly legal powers, at least recommendatory powers to monitor, watch, and see if the next generation is safe in their hands, some forward movement can happen. And I don't think much is needed in the structure, but it is only in the way they are being they are functioning and being sort of evaluated.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next observation I should say, there is one more small observation done by Dr. Venkatesh Prasad.
Yes.
Of course, you have touched upon this, sir. Role of a teacher in higher education and quality enhancement in higher education.
Mm.
You have really told that, yes, research should be the priority now for in higher education. Else we will not transform from second layer to the third layer. You have sufficiently talked about, yeah, higher education means there is not necessary higher education, but all the three layers, the teacher has his own or her own role in all the three layers. Teacher is indispensable, and you have touched upon all the importance of teacher in higher education more so at the later half of your talk. Now, the other observation again by Professor Arvind Srinivas is interesting. He says that research scientists in industry earn 25% more than counterparts in academia. Based on a study from academia to affluence, that is the source he is quoting. What is that should motivate pursuing research in Indian academia, apart from getting individual recognitions like field medals and Nobel Prize, which can only carry publicity but not matching finances?
Sir, it is very sad that academic people, where if a country has to prosper, it's only out of the education system, sir. If education gets a lower, say, allocation in the GDP and sub-quality infrastructure to care to other sort of, say, factors that govern education continues, there is no hope. But what can happen over a period is that at least the professional colleges, in my opinion, this is purely my personal opinion, I have no proof, but I believe this works, is that I'll take the case of an engineering college to start with, because that is the number which is highest today. If there's an engineering college, there are three kinds of aspirants who join the college. I know a lot of people don't know why they come to engineering also. They have left their engineering jobs with the best companies and have started teaching, doing poultry farm to every other thing later. It's not sort of insulting to do dairying or poultry farming, but they had no interest. They have gone there because everybody else went, except including such people. I will say there are three categories of people. One is those who want to be job ready by the end of the engineering program. Job ready because of the socio-economic conditions, the typical Indian context. The second fellow is the one who wants to pursue higher studies. The third fellow is the one who should become an entrepreneur. I think apart from these three, we have very little of sort of pursuing paths to follow. Therefore, in an engineering college, if more responsibility has to come, engineering colleges also have to sort of not run for commercial purposes, but have commercial interest, but not contrary to the academic things, which also was a question raised in the earlier part. The answer could be something like this. Every engineering college or management college, there should be a cluster. The cluster consists of proof of concept kind of industries, may not be big manufacturing industries. There should be a lot of industry R&D departments and those who want to work on conversion of concepts to productization. Such industry should be, industrial complex should be there. And then the students who want to be job ready can go and get some experience in some of those industries, or they also get these additional certification courses like on Coursera, Java, that this. They should be enabled to see that they get enough hands-on exposure and get the job. And these people don't have to spend much, but on the contrary, by just as it happens in the West, if some of these boys can also go and do some work in the industries, 6 hours a week, 8 hours a week, as can be permitted by some norms, they will also be very responsible because he earns the money that he spends and pays towards his fees. The student is surely going to be a good, say, employee the day he finishes his job. He has already hands-on experience. The other fellow is the one who wants to pursue higher studies. For such fellows, research is a must. He must be able to publish 1 or 2 papers. And that can happen with the industrial complex that can come around that. The third one is those who want to be entrepreneurs. They should have a lot of credit courses apart from that, maybe credit courses in economics, maybe procurement. Where do you get what? This kind of credit courses, because he wants to be an entrepreneur. He doesn't want to do serious studies of, say, antennas for 3 semesters or 4 semesters and get a paper there. He's not interested. So a mix and match for all these 3 people will be able to make better employment capabilities for them. And in the process, the faculty can go and work in the industry for 6 months to 1 year, produce products, services, patents, whatever, etc. And if there is a sort of consortium of industries and the college, because you have provided this space, the industries pay you. The man who works in the industry comes with better hands-on exposure to teach as a teacher, and his economic condition depends on what he earns in the industry as such, along with his salary. It can be an additional income, or 6 months he gets something like an industry man. For example, if a professor gets here some 1.5 lakhs, and if he can earn 5 lakhs there, he is prepared to teach there for 6 months, teach there, work in the industry. His expertise is also much better. So, a mixer integration of industries with teaching institutions is absolutely essential. Otherwise, it is also another extreme case where today in US, a professor has to struggle all the time to take care of his salary and his students' say funding for projects. So it's again putting them into pressure cookers. But a reasonable blend of industry work and teaching work on the same campus will make both better. This will also solve the financial problem. This is just a thought.
Thank you, sir. Sir, our Dean Dr. S. Srinivas, sir, mic is enabled. Sir?
Hello?
Hello,
Sir?
Yes.
Jasma.
Yes, sir.
Doctor, I have a small reading, one last question, okay, from Dr. S.S. Karur. Just it takes only 1 minute for Dr. Nagaraja to answer. Due to corona pandemic, all development works have been stopped. Similarly, why can't government stop funding on research work for at least 3 more years to concentrate only on teaching and quality improvement?
Sir, this is a very tricky question in taking me into a trap. If all the universities were closed for some years, what would happen means nothing would happen, the world will go on. Forget one research. But the thing is, the pace at which we are all moving cannot stop. Today, we are in a world where we are on a conveyor belt. And okay, we have done good teaching, but no research, let us say. If all those students become unemployable, I think we are adding some more. Not that research will ensure everybody a job, but with all the so-called good attributes we have been discussing so far, as to research not as an ornamental flower, but as a necessary for better learning and sort of acquiring the competence, I think it should continue, but to what extent is a matter of societal, let's say, need. And I won't say, when I say stop research, need not stop at all places. Duplicate research, same words, research funding, there is same research problem being funded at 2 places, 3 places. That has been happening in this country and for a long time. Therefore, some review of how to fund that will solve the problem than stopping funding. Sir, Dr. Karur, this is my
Wonderful, sir,
perception.
wonderful, very nice, very nice. But one should realize that there is nothing like teacher only teaching and researcher only researching, sir. It is always the blend. One
Yes.
is both are integral to each other. Both have to happen simultaneously. Then only there will be a benefit for the students where the depth of the
Adhyayana,
knowledge.
Adhyapana, both should go together.
Absolutely, absolutely, sir. So now
Yes,
we
sir.
stop for
Yeah.
the question answer session, and I
you, sir.
request Dr. Srinivasa, our Dean Engineering, to have some remarks and then closing remarks by Vice Chancellor.
Thank you.
Sir, very good evening,
Namaste,
sir.
Srinivas.
Very good evening, sir.
Pleasure seeing you.
On the note of a Teachers' Day, meeting a great teacher like you is a privilege, sir.
Sir, I am blessed.
Yes, I still recall the wonderful physics classes that we had from you, and that basis has helped us all along till now, sir. It's going to help in the future also. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Now, may I request Honorable Vice Chancellor to give his remarks, sir.
Good evening. On behalf of BITES, I take this opportunity to thank Professor H.S. Nagaraj for consenting and delivering the lecture, which is very, very important and relevant at this point of time. I think he touched upon all the important things a teacher has to do and the education system has to do for this country to prosper. And all of us know Dr. H.S. Nagaraj, the kind of work that he has carried out and demonstrated. And he has also embarked on a new journey now, wherein the Prayoga is going to implement some of the things that he shared with us today. The experiential learning, the exploratory learning. I'm sure the dream of H.S. Nagaraj is going to come true over a period of time. I think some efforts have to be put in, and he has started that particular thing. And I describe him as a person and a teacher with clarity and commitment. That speaks volumes about the person and also the commitment that he has shown. BITES is really fortunate to get his time for this lecture. I'm sure the participants are immensely benefited from the lecture. I assure Nagaraj sir that we will definitely do our best to bring in changes, at least in few universities like Dayanand Sagar University. Dayanand Sagar University will take few steps to bring that science component, at least starting with an exploratory kind of thing and an exponential kind of learning. We have started it already. I think we need to do it much more rigorously than we were doing earlier. I think over a period of time, if one or two universities are going to start it, depending on the success of these few universities, other universities will follow. I think it's necessary for some universities to take that step forward. I assure that the Dayanand Sagar University will take the inputs that are given, the advice that are given, will implement it and report back to you after a few years the results of what we have achieved or what we have acquired in the next few years. Thank you.
Just a
Thank you very much.
small interception, Dr. Basu.
Yes, sir.
Just
Yes, sir.
it
Yes,
slipped
sir.
out of my mind.
Yeah.
At this juncture, I would welcome all the Dayanand Sagar University faculty and other people to visit Prayoga and bless that place.
Sure, sir.
It's
Sure,
an
sure.
invitation. Kindly make it. We'll be very glad, sir.
Yes, sir. So I can also tell the participant that we are uh, forming an association, some kind of understanding, collaboration between Prayoga and Dayanand Sagar University for better work to be done in the future. I assure you that the interactions will be much more frequent and more purposeful and useful in the years to come. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Namaste.
Namaste, sir.
Namaste, sir. Bye.
Jasma madam, shall we close?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I will. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much for this talk. And it will be
Thank you.
remembered for long. And I thank on behalf of Bytes, everybody who participated actively. A lively interaction was there. And grateful thanks to Professor Nagaraja and also Honorable Vice Chancellor for making this function or for making this talk program a reality. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Namaste. Bye.
Thank you, sir. Bye.